O God, do we give thanks. O Lord, our God, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who has set thy glory above the heavens. I will praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will show forth all thy marvelous works. Heavenly Father and my God, I come to thee on this 11th day of June in the Holy Spirit through the Lord Jesus Christ, thy only beloved Son, in whom thou art well pleased, sitting at thy right hand and making intercession for all the household of God, the Savior and Redeemer of mankind. Heavenly Father, we give thanks for our witness this morning, this 11th day of June, in the second quarter, in the year of our Lord 2026. In the newness of life, in our right minds, conscious of our being and our surroundings. We thank thee for thy safekeeping of our household and all in our respective neighborhoods. O Most High, the Lord of heaven and earth, I come to thee with thanksgivings for thy loving kindness, thy faithfulness, thy tender mercies, thy matchless grace, and thy steadfast love toward us, the people of the Federation of St. Christopher Nevis, protecting us by day and by night, and as we now in the hurricane season of 2026. O Lord God of heaven and earth, the rulers in the face of men, we gather in this assembly for today's business session. I bring to thee the Honorable Madam Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of this assembly, that thou will grant them the wisdom and the understanding as they conduct the business session of the assembly in accordance with the rules and regulations, to uphold the principles with due diligence, with fairness and justice to all in attendance. Lord, at this time I bring to thee the elected and selected servants gathered in this honorable house today, the 11th day of June, to discuss the business matters of this administration that is at hand. Indeed, Lord, thou knowest their hearts, their intent, their attitudes, and their aspirations. Grant them the wisdom and understanding that in the discussion today they will conduct themselves with respect towards each other as good stewards of the elected servanthood responsibilities for the people of the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis. I pray that in their quest that they will honestly exercise their steadfast servanthood service with all prudence, with due diligence, with compassion, with justice, and with distinction, without fear or favor towards the people of the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, of whom they are elected to serve, putting country above self at all levels of service with love, justice, and fairness. O Lord God of heaven and earth, I pray that the matters of the order for the business session today will be with fairness, with justice, that all will be beneficial, and that it impact the positive well-being of the citizens and residents of the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, going forward with your blessings. O God of all creation, with humbleness of heart, these things I ask with thanksgivings in our Savior's precious name. Amen. May all join me with our Father prayer at this time. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Pastor Evelyn. You may be seated.
Confirmation of minutes.
Minutes are deferred.
Messages from the Governor General.
There are no messages.
Announcements by the Speaker.
Just brief announcements. Honorable members, my office is in receipt of notices of absences from the honorable members for St. Christopher 3, St. Christopher 4, St. Christopher 1, and St. Christopher 5. That is the extent of the notices for this morning.
Presentation of papers and of reports from committees. Petitions. Government notices. Unofficial notices. Questions. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers.
I recognize the honorable member for St. Christopher 8.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise as the Minister with responsibility for NEMA to speak specifically on what is taking place in our country, throughout the region, and indeed the world. Madam Speaker, the matter I wish to address at this time is of critical national importance. The ongoing drought affecting our federation and its impact on the availability of water for our people. Madam Speaker, let us begin with a few facts. St. Kitts and Nevis is currently experiencing a significant drought, one that is affecting many countries throughout the region. This prolonged dry period has been driven by a combination of factors, including the effects of El Niño and the broader consequences of global climate change, which we have been speaking about since we got into office. Madam Speaker, the rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and increasingly unpredictable weather events are realities that small island developing states such as ours must now confront with urgency and determination. And I'm pleased to say this is why we came up with our vision, a sustainable island state, in an effort to make sure we are proactive in dealing with these phenomena. The results has been a substantial reduction in rainfall, Madam Speaker, and the natural replenishment of our water resources. Wells, aquifers, and other water sources have come under tremendous pressure. Consequently, many citizens and residents are experiencing interruptions and challenges in accessing a consistent supply of water. We acknowledge these difficulties, Madam Speaker. We understand the frustration and inconvenience that families, businesses, and communities are facing. This government, however, does not minimize those concerns. These are serious concerns. We recognize them, and we are responding to them with seriousness and resolve. Even before this would have been the reality, we have been championing a response, a proactive response, since we took office. The Ministry's responsibility for climate action has been at the forefront as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is important that our nation understands the context in which this challenge is being addressed. For years, the necessary investments required to secure our water future was simply not made. And I speak specifically of St. Kitts in this context. I want to say that again. Madam Speaker, for years, the necessary investments required to secure our water future was simply not made. No desalination plant was built. No comprehensive strategy was implemented to significantly expand water production. Opportunities to strengthen our resilience through additional drilling were not pursued. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, in 2015, we know that the contract with BEAD basically was not pursued, Madam Speaker. Hence, no new development in securing our water sources here. Even environmental initiatives, Madam Speaker, were limited. As a result, this government inherited a water system that was highly vulnerable to prolonged periods of drought and climate-related stress. Madam Speaker, this diagnosis was made many years ago. However, the consequences or the warnings were totally ignored. As far as St. Kitts is concerned, I will not speak to Nevis at this point in time. They were ignored, and absolutely nothing substantial was done under the former administration led by the member from number 7, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, Section 43, the member for number 8.
Madam Speaker, have you recognized him? Just let me know. Have you recognized him? Please indicate. This is a statement by ministers. Have you recognized him?
I recognize the honourable member for St. Christopher 7. Save and accept to say that statements by minister, honourable member for St. Christopher's.
Thank you.
Save and accept to say that statements are not for interruptions.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, please.
The rules of the House indicate that when and under what conditions Section 43 applies, it's a general rule of the Parliament.
Yes, please. Yeah. There is also the rule where statements are not to be interrupted. What is the
Madam Speaker, if you allow me to rise.
Honorable members, it is too early for this. I am speaking, honorable member. You can't pay attention to one rule and ignore the other. When the speaker has the chair and the mic is on, I am speaking to all the members present. Everyone is to be silent. That is a rule as well. You can't pick and choose the rules that you want to be applied and the time that you want them to be applied. The minister, the honourable member for St. Christopher 8, is giving a statement. He is not to be interrupted, just as any other minister has the right to speak without interruption. Honourable member for St. Christopher 8, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as usual, I encourage all of us in here to follow the rules of this honourable House. And out of respect and deep respect, Madam Speaker, I abide by your authority in this House. I will continue, Madam Speaker, and to say lastly, please allow us to follow the rules in this House. Madam Speaker, as a result, this government inherited a water system that was highly vulnerable to prolonged periods of drought and climate-related stress. However, and I want to stress this however, rather than dwell on what was not done by the last administration, we chose to focus on what must be done. Madam Speaker, since taking office, this government has embarked upon one of the most ambitious water infrastructure programs in the history of this federation, Madam Speaker. We have invested tens of millions of dollars, Madam Speaker. Over $60 million. That money could have been used for many other things, but we had to reprioritize, Madam Speaker. Because had we not done that, today, St. Kitts and Nevis would have less than 10% of our population with access to 24/7 water. Madam Speaker, many asked at that time, why would a government take up so much money to build a desalination plant? But I think at this time that our people can clearly see the reason behind it. We had to be proactive and to correct what I will call the absence of an implementation strategy to deal with what was forecasted. Madam Speaker, we have spent money. That is being proactive. We did not stop by and just complain about what was not done. We have taken action to make sure that we get this done. We have undertaken major drilling initiatives, including significant investments in Keyon and other communities. Madam Speaker, Keyon is an area that we know was part of the past administration, and nothing was done to resolve this serious matter for the people of Keyon. Madam Speaker, we invested hundreds of thousands of dollars to secure a well in Keyon. And today, Keyon is one of those communities where 90+% of the members of that community have access to 24/7 water, even under the drought situation at this time, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have financed and constructed a major desalination plant, as was discussed before. We have expanded distribution networks, Madam Speaker, and today I can speak to a new line or pipes that has now been connected, that is now connecting the aquifer with the St. Peter's community through Taylors. We have also connected the western side of the Bastia area as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they came to make noise and now they're leaving because the facts are too hard. The facts are too hard. The facts are hard. Not a thing done in Keyon, Madam Speaker. I'm so upset, Madam Speaker, that the rules of the House are being totally disregarded by one who has spent more time in this House than I have and one who was a former Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, I continue to respect the rules of the House. I must say that this House is not Dolly House. This is where we come to discuss serious matters. And serious matters we must discuss. We must sit and discuss serious matters, Madam Speaker. But that will speak for itself. Madam Speaker, the truth hits hard, you know. There's a member from in this House on the opposite side who likes to talk about how much he invested in water on the other side. Madam Speaker, we are now investing this on the St. Kitts side. We have financed and constructed a major desalination plant. We have expanded distribution networks, Madam Speaker, connected new areas, upgraded critical infrastructure, and procured pumps, motors, and other essential equipment to improve the reliability and efficiency of the water system. Madam Speaker, I can say that we have immediately ordered new pumps or new motors for the aquifer to pump water into St. Peter's and to pump water on the western side of the Bastia area through Taylors and on the other side as well. So these areas, Shadwell and so forth, to get more water because we are producing more water, Madam Speaker. Those are expected to come tomorrow, and we are expected to implement them as quickly as possible to help to ease the drought conditions that we have in St. Kitts and Nevis at this time. Madam Speaker, these are not temporary measures. These are transformational investments designed to build long-term resilience and ensure water security for future generations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, can you imagine under the last administration, $4.2 billion, and today, when we would have predicted over a decade ago that we would be in this very situation, not a well dug in Keyon, not a desalination plant built, no substantial investment in the water infrastructure, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also wish to place on record the profound gratitude of this government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis to the government and people of the Republic of China, Taiwan, for their significant financial support and steadfast partnership in helping us address our nation's water challenges. At a time when climate change and drought continue to threaten water security across our region, Taiwan has stood as a true friend and development partner. The assistance has certainly helped the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam Speaker, the drought we are experiencing today presents real and immediate challenges. There is no denying that reality. It must also be recognized that this government is confronting those challenges through planning, investment, and action on a scale not previously seen in the sector. While some citizens continue to experience difficulties because of the severity of the drought, we want the nation to know that we are working every day to provide both immediate relief and permanent solutions, Madam Speaker. Our objective remains clear: to build a modern, resilient, and sustainable water system capable of delivering reliable access to water for every citizen and resident of St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam Speaker, I would like to place on the record as well that presently there is a drilling of well in the Sadlers area to bring permanent relief to that area as well. And the drilling will take place all around the country. I think we are moving to Sandy Point next, and I think St. Paul's, and we are coming all around that part of the country so that everyone would have access to 24/7 water, which is our ultimate goal, Madam Speaker. And I want to say to our people, this is costing us tens of millions of dollars. It's going to surpass $100 million very soon if it has not passed that number as yet. This is why we had to reprioritize, because a country without water is a country that cannot function. Water is life. Water, after air, is the most essential substance for the survival of man, and therefore for the survival of any community, country, and for its advancement. Madam Speaker, our objective is clear. It's to build a modern, resilient, and sustainable water system capable of delivering reliable water to all of our citizens. This work cannot be completed overnight, Madam Speaker. We were only elected in 2022, and right away we got to work, Madam Speaker, because we knew when we went into office, we picked up what was on the desk, which was a forecast that showed that St. Kitts and Nevis would experience significant drought, water shortages, and that is why we invested so much from day one. Madam Speaker, the challenges created over many years cannot be reversed in a matter of months. However, the investments are being made, the infrastructure is being built, and the results are already beginning to emerge. We will continue to drill, continue to expand capacity, continue to modernize the system, and continue to invest in the long-term water security of our Federation. And Madam Speaker, to our beloved people of this Federation, I say this: we hear your concerns. I hear your concerns. This Labour administration hears your concern. We understand your challenges because we experience them as well. And we remain fully committed to ensuring that every community benefits from a reliable and sustainable water supply. Madam Speaker, this government will not relent in its efforts until the goal of dependable 24-hour water access becomes a reality for all. Madam Speaker, I want to wrap up this statement by saying on Friday, this Friday, and just let me give the date, there's a significant press conference being put on by NEMA to really help to update our people as to what is happening at this time. So if you give me just a second, let me pull that up. So this is the flyer, important announcement, and it says National Emergency Management Agency National Press Conference. Topics to be discussed: update on drought conditions, strategic response measures. And this will take place Friday, 12th June 2026, time 9 a.m., venue NEMA conference room. And of course, this will be carried on SKNS, ZIZ, and other networks. And for inquiries, persons can call 466-5100, or they can email NEMA at nema@gov.kn. I'll say it again. For any inquiries, you can call 466-5100, or you can email NEMA at nema@gov.kn. Madam Speaker, once again, I want to reiterate that this government will not relent in dealing with the water matter, which is fundamentally as a result of climate change and the drought from El Nino, and also to ensure that the necessary investments are made so that we can get here. So I'm proud of what we have done, but I can say we continue to work because we have not achieved our ultimate goal, but we are well on our way. And I want to reassure our people that that is our commitment. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there another statement? Madam Clerk? Your mic, Honourable Member. Member for number 8, your microphone.
Oh, sure.
Personnel explanations. Motions relating to the business of the National Assembly and moved by a minister. Introduction of bills and first reading.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise again to lay before this Honourable House and have read for the first time a bill shortly entitled Financial Services Regulatory Commission Amendment Bill 2026. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Seconder, I recognize the Honourable Senator Phillip.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second that motion.
Question is that the bill shortly entitled Financial Services Regulatory Commission Amendment Bill 2026 be read a first time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act, Cap 21.10, otherwise known as the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Financial Services Regulatory Commission Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a first time. Next bill. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, once again I rise to lay before this Honourable House and have read for the first time a bill shortly entitled Gaming Control Amendment Bill 2026. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Is there a seconder? I recognize the Honourable Senator Dr. Clark.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second that motion.
The question is, mics please, microphones please. Honourable Member? The question is that the bill shortly entitled Gaming Control Amendment Bill 2026 be read a first time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Gaming Control Act, Cap 17.01, otherwise known as the Gaming Control Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Gaming Control Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a first time. Next bill. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise once again to lay before this Honourable House and have read the first time a bill shortly entitled Anti-Proliferation, Financing of Weapons of Mass Destruction Amendment Bill 2026. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a second? I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 2.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Anti-Proliferation, Financing of Weapons of Mass Destruction Amendment Bill 2026 be read a first time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Anti-Proliferation, Financing of Weapons of Mass Destruction Act, Cap 4.43, otherwise known as the Anti-Proliferation, Financing of Weapons of Mass Destruction Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Anti-Proliferation, Financing of Weapons of Mass Destruction Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a first time. Next bill. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8.
Yes, Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise to lay before this Honourable House and have read for the first time a bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Amendment Bill 2026.
Is there a second? I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Yes. Grateful, Madam Speaker. I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Amendment Bill 2026 be read a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Virtual Asset Act, Cap 21.29, and for related matters, otherwise known as the Virtual Asset Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a first time. Next bill. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise once again to lay before this Honourable House and have read for the first time a bill shortly entitled Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2026. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Is there a seconder? I recognize the Honourable Senator, Dr. Clark.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I second that motion.
Very well. The question is that the bill shortly entitled Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2026 be read a first time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Anti-Terrorism Act, Cap 4.02, otherwise known as the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a first time. The next bill, please. I recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I beg your leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill shortly titled Extradition Amendment Bill 2026.
Is there a seconder? I recognize the Honourable Senator Philip.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second that motion.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Extradition Amendment Bill 2026 be read a first time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Extradition Act, number 10 of 2025, otherwise known as the Extradition Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Extradition Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a first time. Next item.
Public Business, Bills, second reading.
I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise once again to lead the debate of and have read for the second time in this Honourable House the bill shortly entitled the Banking Amendment Bill 2026. This bill, Madam Speaker, forms part of the continued work to keep our banking laws modern, fair, practical, and responsive to the realities of today's financial world. The Banking Act is the main law that governs banking in St. Kitts and Nevis. It sets out who may operate as a bank, how banks are licensed, how they are supervised, what standards they must meet, and what powers the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has as the regulator of banks in our region. Madam Speaker, it is useful to recall the history of this legislation. The Modern Banking Act was passed in 2015. It was enacted as part of a modern, harmonized banking framework across the Eastern Caribbean, across the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. That means St. Kitts and Nevis, along with other members of the Currency Union, moved toward a common legal and regulatory space for banking. That common regulatory space is extremely important, Madam Speaker. We share one currency, Madam Speaker. We share one central bank. And may I add, Madam Speaker, that we are about to consider the pictures or the images on our currency, Madam Speaker. Our banks operate in a regional financial system where risks do not stop at national borders. A weakness in one bank or in one part of the currency union can affect public confidence across the entire region, Madam Speaker. That is why it's important that we harmonize this bill. This is why all banks in the currency union must operate under strong, consistent rules. A single regulatory space allows the ECCB to supervise banks across the region more effectively, apply common standards, identify risks earlier, and respond more quickly when there are problems, Madam Speaker. For all people, this matters because it helps protect their deposits and investments. When a person places money in a bank, Madam Speaker, that person must have confidence, full confidence, Madam Speaker, that the bank is properly supervised, that its risks are monitored, and that its directors and managers are held to proper standards, and that the regulator has the tools to intervene where necessary. Madam Speaker, we know we had the failure of a major bank here in St. Kitts and Nevis before, and therefore this is to ensure that this would never ever happen again in our federation. Madam Speaker, strong regional supervision helps protect the savings of workers, families, pensioners, small businesses, churches, community groups, and everyone who depends on the banking system. The Banking Act is therefore a law that supports trust in the financial system and helps protect the money that people work hard to earn and to save. Madam Speaker, because banking changes consistently, the Banking Act must also be reviewed and updated regularly. The financial sector today is very different from the sector that existed even a decade ago. We now have online banking, mobile banking, card payments, electronic transfers, digital records, third-party service providers, cyber risks, fraud risks, new financial products, and new customer expectations. Therefore, Madam Speaker, the laws must change to keep up to date with all these significant changes. A law that governs banking must keep pace, Madam Speaker. That is why the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, as the regulator of banks in the OECS and the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, regularly reviews the legal framework that governs the banking sector. These updates help protect depositors, as mentioned, keep our financial system stable, improve confidence, and ensure that banks operate with fairness and transparency. Madam Speaker, these suite of changes that we bring from time to time, these are to ensure that our banking system continues to keep up to pace and that our people can actually be protected. These are actually done in concert with the central bank, and these are applied across the whole Caribbean. So as Minister of Finance, I lead on this in every other country in the ECCU. They will also present these to Parliament, Madam Speaker. So this is really a regional approach to banking, which is essential to keep our system strong and safe for our people. Madam Speaker, the bill before us is substantial. It amends 71 provisions of the Banking Act, Madam Speaker. It is substantial. Many of these amendments are technical and drafted in nature, while others are substantive and will directly affect the relationship between banks and their customers. Madam Speaker, I will speak today to the broad purpose and the practical impact of the bill. The detailed provisions will be addressed further during the debate. But in a broader sense, and to give our people a deeper understanding with respect to these changes that are being sought today in this debate, it is important that everyone understands the impact of these amendments and how it would affect their daily lives, Madam Speaker. At the end of the day, that is what people want to know. How is this going to affect my life on a daily basis? Madam Speaker, banking is no longer something that affects only large businesses or financial experts. It affects the parent receiving a salary, the young person opening a first account, the small business owner applying for credit, the elderly person trying to access services, the homeowner managing a mortgage, the consumer trying to understand fees, charges, and repayment terms. Madam Speaker, these, of course, affect the lives of almost every person in our country. The public must therefore understand that this bill is about real-life banking experiences. It is about how people are treated when they enter a bank, Madam Speaker. Use an online banking platform, sign a loan agreement, complain about a charge, report a suspected fraud, or try to access basic financial services. Madam Speaker, the bill follows important reforms made in 2025. Those reforms strengthened the law in areas such as consumer protection, market conduct, financial inclusion, protection against shell banks, complaint handling, access to basic banking services, and the role of the Financial Dispute Resolution Commission, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the 2026 bill now refines those reforms. It makes the law clearer, it improves the language, it strengthens certain procedures, it makes the consumer protection framework easier to apply and easier to enforce, Madam Speaker. This bill is also the result of advocacy at the highest levels of our regional financial system. The Monetary Council has instructed the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and I am a member of the Monetary Council, to ensure that banks become more accessible, Madam Speaker. Why have a bank if people can't access it? The bank must become more responsive, Madam Speaker, to our people, to our citizens. And the bank must also be, of course, an institution that is more customer-friendly. Madam Speaker, these amendments give effect to that policy direction. They reflect a clear regional position that banking services must be safe and sound and must also be fair, understandable, and accessible to the people who depend on them every day. Madam Speaker, we have a big bank with all the resources in there and is not serving to the extent that it should the interests of our people. Madam Speaker, we heard the governor of the central bank spoke recently, and he spoke about the billions of dollars that are just sitting in the banks across the ECCU. And therefore, questions are asked, so why can't that be mobilized to help our people, to help our region to continue its development? Madam Speaker, in plain terms, this bill is about making sure that banks deal with people fairly. It requires financial institutions to treat customers honestly. That principle is at the heart of the bill, Madam Speaker. Banks must do more than provide services. They must ensure that customers understand the services being offered, the costs involved, the risks involved, and the rights and obligations that come with those services. Madam Speaker, sometimes you go in a bank and all is what you call the fine writing, and they're so small you don't even know what they're about. We are saying to the bank that they must be, of course, more open, transparent, and ensure that the customer is given the best opportunity to understand what they're dealing with, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, one of the key changes is a stronger focus on clear information. Too often, persons enter financial arrangements without fully understanding interest rates, fees, charges, repayments, penalties, or other important conditions, Madam Speaker. This bill supports the principle that customers should receive information in plain and understandable language before they commit themselves. Madam Speaker, there's a lot of fancy talk that people receive in banks don't serve their purpose. It must be very clear in simple language so they can understand what they are dealing with so that they can make an informed decision. Madam Speaker, if for some reason, even if somebody cannot read and write too well, that does not mean that that person is not intelligent. If you give them the proper information in a different way, they can still make an informed and proper decision in their interest. And so these fancy writing and all these things, they might be necessary for what they're necessary for. However, the customers of the bank must understand them. And so this bill helps to make sure that that is furthered. Madam Speaker, for the everyday consumer, this means fewer surprises. It means that when a person takes a loan, signs up for a card, opens an account, or agrees to another financial product, the bank must explain the main terms clearly in simple language. In other words, you could talk like to everybody like it's a fourth grader in front of you. Simple language that you show everybody would understand. Madam Speaker, even people who have advanced degrees, sometimes they themselves don't even understand what the bank is saying. And so they too need to understand clearly and be given the opportunity to understand clearly. And so we are insisting that that be done in the banks or any financial institution that our customers, our people may enter into. Madam Speaker, customers should have a better understanding of what they're agreeing to, what they must pay, what risk they're taking, and what options they have. The bill also strengthens the rules on disclosure, Madam Speaker. Before entering into a financial contract, a bank must explain the important features of the product, disclose the risks, identify the cost, and provide the customer with time to review the documents. This is especially important for loans, credit arrangements, banking products, and other financial services that may have long-term consequences for households and businesses, Madam Speaker. This will positively affect the daily life by helping families avoid financial commitments they do not understand. Imagine people go and take a loan and then they don't understand what is happening, and they go to the bank and say, well, what is this happening? And the bank say, well, you signed to it. Or the financial institution say, well, you signed to it. In your mind, you did not sign up for that. But you actually signed, but you did not have the full understanding. And we are saying that the bank or the financial institution must have an obligation to provide you with information in a way that you can understand it to make an informed decision. Madam Speaker, this is especially important for loans, credit arrangements, banking products, as was discussed before. Madam Speaker, the bill also addresses unfair contract terms. A banking contract should never be designed in a way that unfairly places the customer at a disadvantage. Where a term is unfair and harmful to the customer, the law will make clear that such a term cannot be enforced against the customer. This matters in everyday life because many people sign banking documents that are long, technical, and difficult to understand. Madam Speaker, I can tell you, when you see the long documents they have and all these jargon, it's as if you have to hire a lawyer to interpret it for you, to break it down for you to fully understand. Even people with advanced degrees sometimes don't even understand the jargon or the words that are used, the terms that are used, and what they are ultimately signing to. Madam Speaker, this amendment helps ensure that unfair terms cannot be hidden in complex language and then used against the customer. In other words, Madam Speaker, funny, fancy terms that some customers will not understand, and that then later bears as a consequence to the customer. It is not fair to the customer. The customer must be given the information in simple, plain language. And if you think they understand the proper English, we'll say it in Kitish and Twang. Madam Speaker, in other words, speak to the customer in a way that the customer will understand. And therefore, we are expressing that through this bill today, Madam Speaker, that we will take action if those things are violated. Madam Speaker, the bill also promotes financial inclusion. This means that banking services should be more accessible to ordinary people, including the elderly, persons with disability, low-income persons, and persons who may have limited financial literacy or limited digital skills. Madam Speaker, why this is important? In the 1970s, before that, our people's money were not accepted in the fancy banks here, and I put fancy in inverted commas in St. Kitts and Nevis. They used to say your money ain't enough, we ain't want your penny ain't mean nothing. And our great-grandparents and our forebearers, sometimes they had to put their money under the bed, inside their bosom, tie it in a handkerchief and hide it in the barrel. Madam Speaker, these are real. Those who lived those days understand what I'm talking about. And then came the first national hero. And then came Sir Edmund Lawrence, God bless his soul, and of course the soul of our first national hero, who said that cannot be the norm. Hence, the National Bank was started, and pennies were accepted. And today, the National Bank is the largest indigenous institution, Madam Speaker, from pennies to billions. And you know what I say to the people in the National Bank? You all better remember where you all come from. Don't act too stush at this time. Remember, it's the pennies that build you, because some of you go from pennies to billions, and when you get to the billions, you forget the pennies that build you. So I want to say to the people of National Bank, remember who your people really are. Remember who established you, who built you. The foundational principles of the bank was always, even those with pennies are welcome, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is to ensure that our people continue to have access to banking services even as the climate for banking is changing, Madam Speaker. And this means a lot to me, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this matters in everyday life because many people sign banking documents I was mentioning, and they are technical, difficult to understand. This amendment helps ensure that unfair terms cannot be hidden in complex languages, as I said before. Madam Speaker, the bill also promotes financial inclusion, as I said. Now, Madam Speaker, one other thing I want to bring here. When I was at the United Nations maybe a year or two ago, I remember there was a particular member of a royal family from a particular country. And her platform at the United Nations was access to banking and banking services. And so they were promoting in areas that were remote that persons should have access to banking, and we should use the digital technology to allow them to have access. That's what the platform is all about. How do you get people to be a part of the formal banking sector? And therefore, Madam Speaker, understanding that we had resolved that problem here in St. Kitts and Nevis so many years ago. Well, if we resolved it so many years ago with pennies, how it is now, people are talking about issues that they're having. Is it because we have forgotten where we have come from? And therefore, this bill is responding to what we have asked for, that the banking sector must be a sector that includes everybody. And therefore, it must be fashioned in that way. And you will not have to compromise any principles of banking at all. Because if in the 70s we could have started a bank with pennies that is now a multi-billion-dollar bank, then now in modern days, having multi-billion dollars with a much more educated population, with the highest minimum wage in the independent OACS, how is it banking must not be accessible to our people, Madam Speaker? And therefore, that is the spirit of this bill. Madam Speaker, this will have a direct impact on people's lives. It means that elderly customers should receive more practical assistance. They have their money too. They must be treated accordingly, Madam Speaker. Our elderly population must not be discriminated against in any way. Madam Speaker, a person with disability should face fewer barriers when trying to access services. That is why we passed the disability, I think we tabled the National Disability Bill here, Madam Speaker. And we are saying to the banking sector that you cannot set up in a way that would present a barrier to our elderly population or to our to persons with disability, Madam Speaker, or to low-income persons. Madam Speaker, low-income people need to be protected too, you know. Because there is some sort of thing going around that if you work for below a certain amount, we're going to take out a certain amount if you have a certain amount in the bank. You need to assess that because sometimes that's what people have. But they must always have access to banking, Madam Speaker. And you can't punish people for not having enough. I know there are people who might use one account for one thing and then have the chunk of money somewhere else. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people who genuinely just need an account because that is where the money comes, but they don't have a lot of financial resources. They must be protected, Madam Speaker. If you could start a multi-billion-dollar bank with pennies, how come now you're telling them the money ain't enough to be in the bank? We can't accept that in this country, Madam Speaker, and that is why I'm a big proponent for the adjustments and the amendments that we are seeking today in the Banking Act. Madam Speaker, low-income persons must be protected and be treated fairly, Madam Speaker, and must have access to what you call a basic bank account. Madam Speaker, the basic bank account is a serious matter. You want to open a bank account in St. Kitts and Nevis, and you have to bring these 2 IDs and this, all sorts of things. And we are saying, well, why is it we can't make it simpler for people to be open, for people to open a bank account? Sometimes children were being turned back from banking institutions here, Madam Speaker. Well, how do children have 2 pieces of ID? The only thing they might have is a passport. They can't get a social security card because they're not working yet. They can't get a voter's ID because they're not eligible yet. You're not going to accept their school ID. And the only thing they have is a passport, some of them. But definitely they can get a birth certificate. And you are telling them you need 2 pieces of ID. Well, how does that work? And proof of address. They don't have no mortgage, no house. But you are denying those young people on the basis that they don't have all these things which hardly any young person in St. Kitts and Nevis will have. And so, Madam Speaker, this seeks to deal with those barriers so that young people in St. Kitts and Nevis can have accounts. Madam Speaker, that is why we started the Aspire program. The Aspire program gives every child from 5 to 18 on St. Kitts and Nevis too the opportunity to have an account, and with that $500 in savings and $500 to invest, Madam Speaker. And they should have an account, Madam Speaker. Now we are hearing that we understand the parents must be involved, but the children must be able to have an account. And we should start to engender in them, Madam Speaker, how to access banking services, how to save, how to invest, so that, Madam Speaker, a lot of us who grew up broke had to wait until we get big to start to build something. They can start building it while they are in school. So the next generation should have a better outlook than our generation had, Madam Speaker. And so this amendment, these amendments we are looking at are responding to modern conditions and also to ensure that all of our people, man, woman, child, persons living with disability, the elderly, whoever you are, you can have access to banking services as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill strengthens the responsibility of banks to protect that information that people might bring to the bank as well. Madam Speaker, it's very, very critically important for that. Madam Speaker, apart from strengthening that information, the information is important. You don't want, when you walk into a bank, you hear your information all over the place. Those who work in the bank and have access to your information must know that under no circumstances that they can divulge your information. And if they divulge your information, there will be serious consequences, Madam Speaker. People must have confidence that the information that they give, which a lot of the times are very private and personal information, that that information is well protected within the confines of the bank, Madam Speaker. This bill deals with that. Madam Speaker, people must not know your business. Your business is private, and the bank has an obligation, not only an obligation, a duty to protect your information. Madam Speaker, what does this bill deals with? This bill deals with? This bill also strengthens the approach to fraud and misuse of customer assets. As more banking services move online, customers face new risks from scams, cyber-related fraud, and unauthorized use of financial information. The bill requires banks to have proper systems to prevent and reduce fraud and to take responsibility where loss arises from fraud or misuse involving assets under their administration or control. Madam Speaker, the bank has to protect what you put in the bank, and it has an obligation to do so. And if it does not do so, there can be consequences. Madam Speaker, this is particularly important for our people who may not have the technical knowledge or resources to protect themselves from sophisticated fraud. It places a stronger responsibility on banks to maintain safe systems and to respond properly when something goes wrong. Madam Speaker, there is a logical argument or discussion that sometimes the bank has to charge some fees in order to build out a cybersecurity system that protects the assets that people put in there. However, this must be looked at very closely so that these are not severe consequences for the customers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill also improves complaint handling and dispute resolution. When a customer has a complaint against a bank, the process should be clear. You can't have a complaint about the bank and they're just pushing it under the rug, Madam Speaker. You must be heard in a clear, transparent, and open process, Madam Speaker. Customers should know where to go, how to complain, what information to provide, and how the complaint will be handled. Madam Speaker, the bill strengthens the role of the central bank in receiving and investigating complaints and clarifies the powers of authorized officers to gather information and examine issues where necessary. Madam Speaker, the question is, there are people who might want to abuse this, but we have found out that the majority of people, the vast majority of people, will not abuse this. Because most people who complain, they have a legitimate reason for complaining. However, the banking sector must make sure that those who have complaints, that they're dealt with accordingly and appropriately. Madam Speaker, this will improve daily life by giving customers a clearer path when they feel they have been treated unfairly. Madam Speaker, human beings need air, we need water, we need food, we need shelter, clothing, and other things to survive. You know what we need? We have spiritual needs as well. That's what differentiates us fundamentally from animals. We have spiritual needs. And one of our spiritual needs is the spiritual need of justice, Madam Speaker. Justice is important. And therefore, if a customer is complaining and feel as if they were treated unfairly or some injustice was passed, they should have the opportunity to deal with that matter, Madam Speaker. And so banking institutions must deal with their customers in a fair and just way. Madam Speaker, the bill also refines the role of the Financial Dispute Resolution Commission. This commission is intended to provide a specialized avenue for resolving disputes between financial consumers and banks. It can consider complaints, request further information, order compensation or refunds where appropriate, require correction of inaccurate information, and take other steps to ensure fairness, Madam Speaker. This is important because ordinary customers should have access to a fair and practical dispute resolution system without immediately having to resort to costly and lengthy court proceedings. Madam Speaker, this is important. Every day I hear people complaining about this institution or that institution. Whether it is true or not, I don't know. But at least there should be a system and a mechanism and a process in place for the person to feel a sense that justice would have been carried. It's not just about the justice, it's the perception as well. The perception that these institutions are so regulated that I am protected if I am to have any dealings with these institutions. Madam Speaker, the bill further empowers the central bank to ensure codes of conduct and financial market conduct. These codes may deal with matters such as product design, disclosure pricing, fair treatment, financial education, privacy of consumer data, complaint handling, fraud, refunds, account reconciliation, and debt recovery. Madam Speaker, all of that, I know I went a bit fast, but basically to say all that the bank has to offer, that it empowers the central bank to deal with these issues. And that is the key of that, Madam Speaker. These codes will have the force of law. That is significant, Madam Speaker. This is just words, you know. They would have the force of law. It means that detailed rules can be developed by the regulator and applied across the banking sector as practices resolve. Madam Speaker, this bill also reinforces our stance against shell banks. Shell banks present serious risk to financial integrity and international confidence. The bill strengthens the penalty framework for breaches of the shell bank prohibition. This supports our national and regional commitment to strong anti-money laundering standards, responsible financial supervision, and the protection of our country's reputation. Madam Speaker, somebody want to come and just set up something. Nothing really happening, you know. It is a shell, but they're using it for nefarious reasons, Madam Speaker. And we are saying that they too must be dealt with in order to make sure that we protect our system. So, Madam Speaker, let me break it down. In simple terms, the Banking Amendment Bill 2026 does the following. And the reason why I'm speaking in these simple terms is that for our people to understand how it will impact their lives on a daily basis and to understand the purpose of bringing this bill. This is people-centered across the ECCU. It makes, Madam Speaker, banking rules clearer. It strengthens the duty of banks to treat customers fairly. It requires better disclosure of fees, risks, charges, and contract terms. It promotes plain language in banking contracts. It protects consumers from unfair terms and abusive practices. It supports access to banking services for vulnerable and underserved persons. It strengthens protection for customer data. It improves fraud prevention obligations. It improves the handling of complaints. It strengthens dispute resolution, and it gives the central bank stronger tools to regulate market conduct. Madam Speaker, a strong banking system must be financially sound it must also be fair, transparent, and trusted by the public. This bill supports that balance. It protects consumers while maintaining confidence in the banking sector. It strengthens regulations while giving banks clearer rules to follow. Madam Speaker, it supports financial stability while ensuring that ordinary people and small businesses are better protected in their dealings with financial institutions. Madam Speaker, this is a bill about practical improvements to the daily banking experience of people. It is about clearer information, fairer treatment, better access, stronger protection, and more effective complaint resolution. It is also about protecting deposits, preserving confidence, and ensuring that every bank in the currency union, including St. Kitts or Nevis, of course, operates under strong common standards. Madam Speaker, for these reasons, I wish to thank the Central Bank for heading the concerns of the Monetary Council, heeding the concerns of the Monetary Council to put our people, customers of banks, first, and I must further commend the Banking Amendment Bill 2026 to this Honourable House. Madam Speaker, I therefore wish this bill safe passage. May it please you.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8, mover of the bill. I recognize the Honourable Member, the Honourable Attorney General, apologies.
May it please you, Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion. I reserve my right to enter into the debate until the debate has continued.
Very well. Is there another presenter? I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8, mover of the bill, to do his wrap-up.
Madam Speaker, I rise to wrap up the debate on a bill shortly entitled the Banking Amendment Bill 2026, and to further move that this bill be read for a second time in this Honourable House. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Banking Amendment Bill 2026 be read a second time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Banking Act, Cap 21.01, otherwise known as the Banking Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Banking Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a second time. House moves to committee stage.
The arrangement of sections.
The question is that the arrangement of sections stand part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clauses 1 through 27.
The question is that clauses 1 through 27 stand part of the bill. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 28.
Recognize the Attorney General.
Yes. I wish to propose an amendment to clause 28 by replacing it as follows. Section 96R of the Principal Act is amended by deleting subsection 1 and by substituting the following. 1. A licensed financial institution shall A. Publish at a conspicuous place at its places of business, its agents and third parties, and on its website. And B. Provide its financial consumers with a key information document that specifies its interest rates, fees, and charges. This reflects the document that has been circulated to members.
The question is that clause 28, as circulated, stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clauses 29 through 49.
The question is that clauses 29 through 49 stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 50.
I beg that the expression 30 and then 30 be replaced with the expression 30 bracket 30 close bracket, as reflected in the document circulated to members.
The question is that clause 50, as amended and circulated, stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Clauses 51 through 71.
The question is that clauses 51 through 71 stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House resumes. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8.
Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise again to report that the bill shortly titled Banking Amendment Bill 2026 has passed through committee stage with changes that were accepted, and therefore I move now, Madam Speaker, for the bill to be read a third time and pass into law. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Seconder, I recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
I wish to second that motion, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Banking Amendment Bill 2026 be read a third time and passed into law. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Banking Act, Cap 21.01, otherwise known as the Banking Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Banking Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a third time and passed into law. I recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
May it please you, Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise to lead the debate of and have read for a second time in this Honourable House the bill shortly titled the Evidence Amendment Bill 2026. This bill, Madam Speaker, is a focused and important amendment to the Evidence Act, Chapter 3.12. It deals with one area of the law, DNA evidence. Madam Speaker, DNA, and I will look at the member for St. Christopher 6 for him to correct me if I'm wrong, being a medical doctor in the room. DNA is the body's biological fingerprint. It is the unique genetic code found in our cells, and because it is highly individual, it can help identify whether biological material is connected to a particular person. Remember for St. Christopher 6, is that accurate? Good. Thank you so much. At first glance, that sounds technical. It may sound like a matter for scientists, lawyers, police officers, and forensic experts. Yet, it's what goes to the heart of this bill, Madam Speaker, and it goes to the heart of justice. It asks a simple question. How should a modern justice system treat scientific evidence that can help identify the guilty, exclude the innocent, and assist the courts in discovering the truth? DNA evidence can be powerful. It can place a person at a scene. It can connect biological material to a subject. It can eliminate a person from suspicion. It can strengthen a prosecution case. It can also protect an accused person from wrongful suspicion. For those reasons, our law must keep pace with science. The Evidence Act already recognizes DNA evidence, but the existing provision is no longer sufficient for the realities of modern forensic investigation. Scientific methods have advanced, statistical interpretation has advanced, software-assisted analysis is now used in modern DNA work, especially in complex cases involving mixed DNA profiles. The law cannot stand still while science moves forward. A justice system that fails to keep up with technology risks two dangers. First, reliable evidence may be challenged or excluded because the law uses outdated language. Second, powerful scientific evidence may be used without clear safeguards to ensure fairness. This bill addresses both dangers, Madam Speaker. It modernizes the law and it strengthens fairness. It gives investigators and prosecutors a clearer framework. It gives accused persons and defense counsel clearer protections. It gives the court stronger oversight. It gives experts clearer duties. It gives the public greater confidence that DNA evidence will be obtained, used, explained, challenged, and evaluated properly. The bill, Madam Speaker, is built on balance. It does not give the state an unrestricted power to collect DNA. It does not ask courts to accept scientific evidence blindly. It does not remove the rights of accused persons. Instead, it creates a court-controlled, rights-sensitive, scientifically current framework for DNA evidence. I will now take the House through the bill, whilst it's not long, but I will try to explain in plain language how it works, Madam Speaker. Clause 1 provides that the name of the act. It also provides that the act will come into immediate force as we have proposed in an amendment circulated to members. The second section replaces section 155 of the Evidence Act, and the new section is titled DNA Tests, Bodily Samples, and Related Matters. The new section sets out the modern framework for taking, using, disclosure, interpretation, retention, and destruction of DNA samples and DNA results. Now, how does this new regime work in terms of requesting a DNA sample? The new section allows a police officer to request a bodily sample where there are reasonable grounds to suspect that biological matter found at a crime scene or otherwise lawfully obtained during an investigation may connect a person to an offense. In plain language, if blood, saliva, skin cells, hair, or other biological material is found during an investigation, and that material may help determine whether a suspect is connected to the offense, the police may request a sample from that person for comparison. However, Madam Speaker, it's not an open-ended power. The person must be accused of or reasonably suspected of the offense. There must be reasonable grounds. The sample must be connected to a real investigation. The power cannot be used casually or speculatively. This is important because DNA, Madam Speaker, is deeply personal. The law must treat it with care. Now, before a sample is taken, sought, or requested, the person must be informed in ordinary language of 5 things. They must be told what sample is being sought. They must be told why it is being sought. They must be told that the result may be used in evidence. They must be told that refusal, failure, or non-compliance without reasonable excuse may give rise to adverse inferences. They must also be told that an application may be made to the court for an order authorizing the taking of the sample or the obtaining of surrogate DNA sample. This is one of the key fairness protections in the bill. The law does not assume that every person understands the legal or scientific language. That person must be told in simple terms what is happening and what may follow. That protects the accused. It protects the integrity of the investigation. It also protects the admissibility of the evidence, because a court will want to know that the person was properly informed before the sample was taken or sought. Also, the bill distinguishes between non-intimate and intimate samples. Now, a non-intimate sample includes a mouth swab, saliva, hair other than pubic hair, nail material, and other samples of a similarly intrusive nature, less intrusive nature. Now, an intimate sample, Madam Speaker, includes blood, semen, tissue, pubic hair, a swab from a bodily orifice other than the mouth, and other samples of a similarly intrusive nature. This distinction matters because the more intrusive the sample, the stronger the safeguards must be. A non-intimate sample may be taken with written consent or under a court order. An intimate sample may only be taken with written consent or under a court order. In addition, except in the case of urine or saliva, it must be taken by a medical practitioner or another suitably qualified health professional as may be prescribed. That is a practical safeguard for dignity, health, privacy, and safety. Now, the bill also limits the power to serious arrestable offenses. A police officer must not request and a court must not order the taking of a bodily sample unless there are reasonable grounds to suspect the person's involvement in a serious arrestable offense and reasonable grounds to believe that the sample is likely to confirm or disprove that involvement. This means the mechanism is reserved for serious cases only. The bill defines serious arrestable cases to include indictable offenses, offenses punishable by imprisonment for 5 years or more, violent offenses, sexual offenses, firearm and weapon offenses, offenses involving serious damage to property, and other offenses that may be prescribed. In plain terms, this is a serious investigative tool for serious criminal matters. The bill then deals with what happens if a person refuses, fails, or is unable to provide a sample upon request. In that situation, a police officer or the director of public prosecutions may apply to a judge or magistrate for an order authorizing the taking of the sample. This is a major feature of the bill, judicial oversight. The state must go to court. The court must be satisfied that there are reasonable grounds to believe the person committed the offense under investigation or charge. The court must also be satisfied that the sample is likely to produce evidence of substantial probative value. And to this probative, in simple words, means it is important to the case. It has a relation to the case. It is not something ancillary to the case. That phrase is likely to produce evidence that is genuinely important. And the court must further be satisfied that taking the sample is reasonable, necessary, and proportionate in all the circumstances. So it's very important that there's court supervision when the DPP or the police seek to get that order. This is fairness. It requires the court to ask whether the step is justified, whether it is needed, and whether it goes no further than necessary. The court must also be satisfied that appropriate arrangements exist for the sample to be taken safely, hygienically, and with due regard to dignity, health, and the privacy of the person concerned. That is how the bill balances investigation and rights. Now, where the court makes an order, Madam Speaker, under the terms of this bill, the order must specify the type of sample to be taken, whether it is intimate or non-intimate, who is authorized to take it, and the time, place, and manner which it may be taken. The court may also impose conditions to ensure fairness, dignity, safety, continuity, and forensic integrity. This is important because DNA evidence is only useful if it is properly obtained and properly handled. Chain of custody, cleanliness, continuity, and integrity matter. If those matters are not properly controlled, the evidence may be weakened or challenged. The bill also requires the court, as far as reasonably practicable, to ensure that the least intrusive method capable of obtaining a suitable sample is used. That means if a less intrusive sample will do the job, the law should prefer that less intrusive method. If a mouth swab is sufficient, there should be no need for a more intrusive procedure. This is just and it's sensible. It respects the person's dignity while allowing the justice system to obtain the evidence it properly needs. Now, the bill also introduces a clear framework for surrogate DNA sampling. Surrogate DNA sampling means obtaining DNA from material other than a bodily sample taken from the person. For example, DNA, and member for number 6, correct me if I'm wrong, DNA may be recovered from clothing, personal items, utensils, bottles, cups, cigarettes, chewing gum, tissues, masks, bedding, discarded biological material, or material found in lawfully searched premises or vehicles. Is that true, member for number 6?
Perfectly true.
Oh, wonderful. Now, why is this necessary? It is necessary because in real life, a person may refuse to provide a sample. A person may persistently refuse to comply with a court order. A person may abscond. A person may be impossible to locate, and in some cases, direct sampling may be medically inadvisable or impractical. So the law must provide a realistic mechanism for those situations. However, the power is not unlimited. The police officer or the director of public prosecutions may apply to a judge or magistrate. The court must be satisfied that the same essential safeguards are met. The court must be satisfied that reasonable efforts have been made to obtain a direct sample, unless those efforts would clearly be futile or inappropriate. And the court must also be satisfied that the proposed source is reasonably likely to yield DNA attributable to the person concerned. So there are lots of hurdles that the police and the DPP must cross in order to get an order from the court. And the court must be satisfied that the item is likely to contain that person's DNA and that application is justified. Now, in order to do so, they may need an affidavit from a medical practitioner to say, yes, obtaining a cup that a person has been known to have used could lead to the obtaining DNA evidence. And the order must identify the item, class of item, location, premises, vehicle, or source from which a surrogate sample may be obtained. The court may impose conditions to protect privacy, maintain continuity, preserve forensic integrity, and prevent abuse. This is another example of the bill's balance, Madam Speaker. It recognizes the need of serious investigations while placing the court between the state and the citizen. True balance of powers. The bill also restricts how DNA obtained under the section may be used. Unless the court orders otherwise, it may be used only for the investigation or prosecution of the offense for which the sample is sought, related proceedings arising from the same facts, or another purpose expressly authorized by the court. That is important for privacy protection. The bill does not create a freestanding power to collect DNA for any future purpose. It does not allow DNA obtained for an investigation to be used without limit. It confines the use of the material to proper criminal justice purposes, subject to the supervision of the court. Further, the bill gives the court the power to make directions about the retention, storage, further testing, disclosure, restricted use, anonymization, or destruction of any body sample, surrogate DNA sample, test result, or DNA profile. This gives the court the broad supervisory control over the DNA material. That is appropriate because DNA evidence must be managed carefully. It must be preserved where necessary. It must be disclosed where fairness requires disclosure. It must be restricted where privacy requires restriction, and it must be destroyed where the law requires destruction. The bill then addresses when DNA results may be admitted into evidence. DNA results will not be admissible unless there are three main requirements are met. One, the person must have been informed beforehand, as required by the section, of the reason why the sample was being taken or sought. Two, the scientist or suitably qualified expert must give evidence of the DNA comparison together with the statistical interpretation of the results. And three, the prosecution must serve on the defense within a reasonable time before the hearing sufficient details of the basis of the DNA evidence. This is extremely important. DNA evidence must be transparent. The defense must know the basis of the evidence. The court must understand the evidence. The expert must be able to explain the evidence. A scientific result should not be treated as unquestionable simply because it is scientific. It must be capable of being understood, tested, and challenged. The bill also sets out what must be disclosed. The prosecution must provide the methodology used in testing and interpretation. It must identify the statistical measure relied upon. It must provide the population database or reference data. Where the interpretation is not software derived, the formulae, assumptions, and calculations must be disclosed. Where software is used, the disclosure must include the name, version, and developer of the software. It must include a statement that the software is generally accepted within the relevant scientific community. It must include a statement that the software was properly validated and functioning correctly at the time of use. It must provide the parameters, settings, assumptions, databases, output data, reports, and summaries necessary to enable the court and the opposing party to understand and assess the results. This is a modern provision for a modern scientific reality. DNA interpretation is no longer always a simple manual calculation. In complex cases, especially mixed profile cases, software may assist in interpretation. The law must therefore speak directly to software-assisted analysis. At the same time, the law must ensure that the use of software does not become a black box. If a computer program contributes to the result, the court and the defense must have enough information to understand and test the result. That is fairness. The bill also modernizes the language of DNA statistics. The old approach focused on random occurrence ratio. Modern DNA evidence may be expressed by other scientifically recognized measures, including random match probability, likelihood ratio, probability of exclusion, combined probability of exclusion, or another scientifically recognized evaluative measure. The bill says that DNA evidence is not inadmissible merely because the statistical interpretation is expressed in a way other than the random occurrence ratio, provided the court is satisfied that the method used is relevant, sufficiently reliable, and scientifically accepted. This is a very important reform. The law should not reject reliable science merely because the scientist uses a modern expression that our older statute did not expressly mention. The real question should be, is the method relevant? Is it reliable? Is it accepted in the scientific community? Can it be explained? Can it be challenged? Can the court fairly evaluate it? That is the correct approach. Now, the bill further requires the expert, as far as reasonably practicable, to explain in ordinary language what the statistical or probabilistic measure means, what proposition it evaluates, the assumptions on which it depends, and the limits of the conclusion that may properly be drawn. This is vital because the judge, magistrate, jury, accused person, lawyer, and member of the public should not be left confused by scientific terminology. DNA evidence may be powerful, but it must be explained carefully. A statistic may sound impressive, yet it may have limits. It may depend on assumptions. It may evaluate one proposition rather than another. It may assist the court, while still requiring the court to consider the totality of the evidence. And the bill requires that clarity. Now, the bill also makes it clear that the court may receive evidence directed to the reliability, validity, assumptions, weight, or limitations of any statistical method used in the interpretation of DNA evidence. This preserves the ability of the defense to challenge the evidence. It also allows the prosecution to call evidence to support the method used. It allows the court to hear both sides and decide what weight should be given to the DNA evidence. That is how justice should operate. It's a balanced scale, Madam Speaker. So, the purpose of the bill is not to make DNA evidence automatically decisive. The purpose is to make sure DNA evidence is properly obtained, properly explained, properly disclosed, and properly assessed. The bill also addresses destruction. Any sample taken from a person for a DNA test and any document containing the results of the DNA test must, subject to certain exceptions, be destroyed as soon as practicable, where the person is acquitted, cautioned upon admission of the offense, or not prosecuted. This is another important safeguard. If the person is acquitted, or if the matter does not proceed, the state should retain DNA material indefinitely without lawful, should not retain without lawful reason. However, the bill also recognizes that there may be appeals, reviews, retrials, or other proceedings. Therefore, destruction is postponed where those proceedings remain pending, where the time for filing a prosecutorial appeal has not expired, or where a prosecution appeal has been filed and not finally determined. That's fair to both sides. It protects the individual from indefinite retention. It also protects the administration of justice from premature destruction of material that may still be needed in an appeal or retrial. The bill also allows the person, if he or she wishes, to witness the destruction of the sample and documents containing the results. That's a practical way of promoting confidence and transparency. Now, there's also a section which defines terms: bodily sample, DNA test, intimate sample, non-intimate sample, scientifically recognized evaluative measure, serious arrestable offense, and surrogate DNA. And lastly, there's the insertion of a new section, 155A, which sets out the procedure for applications to the courts. So it permits the application to be made without notice, where the court is satisfied that notice would prejudice the investigation, risk the loss or destruction of evidence, or otherwise defeat the purpose of the application. For example, if the police believe that there is surrogate DNA in a property and it could help to resolve the investigation, if you give notice, you suspect that all of the surrogate material may be destroyed. Then you could make an ex parte application and explain to the court why you need to get that surrogate DNA, etc., etc. So it has judicial oversight, gives the court flexibility, allows the court to preserve evidence while considering the application clearly. And Clause 3 creates offenses where a person without reasonable excuse intentionally obstructs the lawful execution of an order made under the proposed new Section 155. Also, there's a Clause 4 which deals with the transition and validating. It says that DNA evidence should not be treated as inadmissible only because the statistical interpretation was expressed using a likelihood ratio. And it further provides that no conviction, acquittal, verdict, finding, sentence, order, ruling, judgment, committal, or other judicial act made before the commencement of the bill is invalid merely because the DNA evidence was expressed as a reference to the likelihood ratio or not the scientifically recognized evaluative measure instead of the random occurrence ratio. So the bill is careful, expressly provides that nothing prevents a court from granting relief where the DNA evidence was unreliable, where material disclosure was not given, etc., etc. And it provides a balance. So, I want to emphasize, the bill is for all sides. It is not one-sided. It's fair to investigators because it gives them a clear legal process when DNA evidence may assist in criminal investigations. It's fair to prosecutors because it recognizes modern scientific methods and reduces uncertainty over the reliable DNA evidence. It is fair to accused persons because it requires ordinary language notice, limits the power of serious matters, requires court approval for compelling sampling, requires necessity and proportionality, protects dignity and privacy, restricts use, requires disclosure, and preserves the right to challenge the science. It is fair to defense counsel because it ensures that the basis of DNA evidence must be disclosed in enough detail to allow proper testing and cross-examination. It is fair to the court because it provides a structured legal framework for deciding whether DNA evidence should be admitted and what weight to be given to it. It's fair to victims and families because it helps ensure that serious crimes can be investigated using reliable modern tools, and it is fair to the public because it strengthens confidence in criminal justice. The law, Madam Speaker, must keep pace with technological advancement. Science doesn't wait for legislation, technology develops, forensic tools improve, methods of analysis become more sophisticated, courts are called upon to assess evidence and older statutes that did not fully contemplate the new developments. And if the law doesn't adapt, uncertainty follows. And that uncertainty helps no one. It does not help the prosecution, the defense, the court, or the public. So modern legislation must recognize modern science while maintaining timeless principles, fairness, due process, judicial independence, disclosure, proportionality, and the right to challenge evidence. This bill does exactly that. It brings the Evidence Act, Madam Speaker, into the present, into 2026. And it does so without abandoning safeguards to define a fair trial. So, Madam Speaker, it is for these reasons that I commend the Evidence Amendment Bill in its current form with the amendments proposed to the members to this honorable House, and I ask the honorable members to give it their support. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you to the Honorable Attorney General, mover of the bill. I recognize the Honorable Member for St. Christopher 2.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second and support the Evidence Amendment Bill 2026. Whilst I find my notes, Madam Speaker, the Evidence Act, for those of us who are legal practitioners, would understand the importance of the Evidence Act. It touches and concerns almost every aspect of legal proceedings, whether it's the criminal court. And if I could just pause to facilitate the changing of the GAD. But the Evidence Act, Madam Speaker, touches and concerns every single facet of our legal proceedings, whether it's in the criminal courts, the civil courts, commercial courts, tribunals, anywhere where evidence is taken, the Evidence Act is absolutely relevant. Today, however, the amendment speaks to, in particular, to DNA evidence. And I rise to make my contribution as someone who has stood in the criminal courts as defense counsel, who understands that the strength of a justice system is measured by how fairly it treats an accused person, especially when the evidence against that person appears to be technical or scientific. Some evidence is clear, it's what you see, what you hear, but in some cases, matters are determined on technical evidence or scientific evidence. DNA evidence can be compelling. It can assist the prosecution. It can identify guilt. However, Madam Speaker, it can also exclude the innocent. And for that reason, the law must ensure that DNA evidence is obtained properly, it is explained clearly, disclosed fully, and tested fairly. Madam Speaker, in my humble opinion, this bill achieves that balance. The bill does not give the state or the prosecution an open-ended power to take DNA. It sets limits, as the mover of the bill would have said in his presentation. It requires what we call in law reasonable grounds, not just a fancy wish. It focuses on serious arrestable offenses. It requires that a sample be likely to confirm or disprove involvement in the offense. This is important, Madam Speaker. It means that the power must be connected to a real investigation and a real evidential purpose. So from the defense perspective, one of the most important protections is the requirement that the person concerned must be informed in ordinary language, and I think the Honorable Attorney General and mover went into details. The accused or suspect must be told what sample is being sought. You can't just pick up an accused person and say, give me a shirt, give me that cup you were drinking from. The accused or suspect must be told, and in simple terms, as the mover indicated, what is being sought. Not just what, but why it is being sought. How the results may be used in evidence, and what the consequences of the refusal, if there is a refusal, and that the court may be asked to make an order. Many persons who enter the criminal justice system do not understand technical language. Fairness requires understanding. A person should know what is being requested and what will follow after there is compliance, or if there is none, well, if you don't accept to offer the items for DNA testing voluntarily. The bill also places the court, which is what the mover focuses on, at the center of compulsory sampling. If a person refuses, fails, or is unable to provide a sample, the police or the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions must then apply to a judge or a magistrate. The court must be satisfied, and this is on the application, that the sample is necessary. So it's not automatic. The application has to be made, and the applicant must be in a position to satisfy the court that the sample is necessary, it is reasonable, proportionate, and likely to produce evidence of substantial value. This, Madam Speaker, for me is a major safeguard. It means the police cannot simply compel a sample because they want one. They must justify the request before an independent judicial officer. The bill also protects the dignity, health, privacy, and safety of the person from whom the sample is being sought. It requires appropriate arrangements for the sample to be taken. It distinguishes between intimate and non-intimate samples. It requires more sensitive samples to be handled by medical practitioners or suitably qualified health professionals, and not simply just officers involved in the investigations. It also requires the least intrusive method as far as reasonably practicable. The language of the bill speaks to fairness. That is the language of what we call constitutional balance. The bill also introduces, as the mover suggested, surrogate DNA sample, but again under court supervision. That is the balance in the act, that is the fairness. And I'm going to have to use my phone, Madam Speaker, because I see I have 1%. And that's how I feel right now too. Like I'm running on empty. But yes. Forgive me as I... What is the member from Nevis 13 saying? Okay. Okay. I can manage to use my phone. Just crave the indulgence of the... I think I could follow from... We have chargers on this side, but they're not long enough to... Yes. So, Madam Speaker, I think where I stopped off was the fact that even that everything is related to the courts. and the court determines on an application whether the threshold is being met, and a number of factors that the court would have to consider to ensure what I call a balance. And it speaks to fairness, not just to the prosecution, but fairness as well to the accused. So the bill introduces, as I was saying, surrogate DNA sampling, but again under court supervision. This may involve DNA recovered from items reasonably believed to have been used, worn, handled, or discarded by the person concerned. And in practice, that may include a cup, if you were drinking a cup, a bottle, cigarette, a mask, clothing, or bedding. And we know how this works in the criminal court. You know, any simple item can help with disproving, and I'm speaking from a defense perspective, not necessarily supporting the arguments for the prosecution, but evidence that can help to disprove the involvement of an accused person. This can be important where a person absconds, persistently refuses, or direct sampling is impracticable, or a case where an item is collected and it has nothing to do with the person who is accused. However, this power is also controlled. The court must be satisfied that the legal requirements are met, that reasonable efforts have been made to obtain a direct sample, unless that would be futile or inappropriate, and that the proposed item is reasonably likely to yield that person's DNA. The bill also protects the accused by restricting how DNA obtained under the section may be used. It may generally be used for the investigation or prosecution of the offense for which it is sought. It can be used in related proceedings arising out of the same facts or another purpose expressly authorized by the courts. By the court, Madam Speaker. This is a crucial privacy protection. So you can't hold on to it and use it. It has to be authorized by a competent court. Another important defense protection is disclosure. The prosecution must serve the defense with the details of the DNA evidence within a reasonable time of the hearing. We're back on cooking on gas again. If you could just crave your indulgence. So, Madam Speaker, another important defense protection is disclosure. And disclosure is, you know, when you are accused of something, you can request from the person accusing you, which is the prosecution, that you have the statements or anything related to the case so that you can properly prepare yourself to answer the case the case against you. The prosecution must serve the defense with sufficient details of the DNA evidence within a reasonable time. So this must be disclosed as well to the person accused within a reasonable time before the hearing. So it cannot be given to you on the morning, the day of, the day before the hearing. That includes the testing method, statistical measure used, the population database or reference data, the assumptions, the calculations, the software, the name, version, developer, validation, settings, parameters, database, and outputs. All of this must be disclosed within a reasonable time so that it can be tested, looked at, and the person who is accused would therefore have the opportunity to assess it before the hearing. This is fundamental, Madam Speaker. An accused person cannot properly challenge evidence they do not understand or do not inspect. Proper disclosure is the foundation, as we will see in the criminal court, for a fair trial. We no longer do trials by ambush, so proper disclosure is what we call the foundation for any fair trial. The bill also requires the expert to explain DNA statistics in ordinary language. That is essential because even as a legal practitioner, when you hear some of the terms being used by the experts, sometimes you can be confused. So this amendment requires the statistics and the expert to explain in ordinary language. DNA evidence should never be treated as magic. The court must understand what the statistic means, what it evaluates, what assumptions it depends on, and what limits apply to the final conclusion. This protects the accused from overstated science. It protects the court from confusion or leading the court into error. It protects the integrity of any verdict that would be delivered. The bill also makes clear that the court may receive evidence about the reliability, the validity, assumptions, weights, limitations of the DNA method used. So not just the good parts in favor of the prosecution, but the limitations on the collection of the data, the validity and the weights that could be attached to it as well, the method used. That preserves the right of the defense to challenge the science. It allows for good and healthy cross-examination, our favorite part. It allows competing expert evidence. It allows the court to decide what weight, if any at all, the DNA evidence should carry. The destruction provisions are also important, and the mover went into details in his presentation. Where a person is acquitted, Madam Speaker, cautioned, or not prosecuted, the sample and related DNA result documents must be destroyed as soon as practicable, subject to pending appeals, of course, or any other related proceedings. So it's not to be stored anyway. If the person from whom the DNA is collected is not going to be prosecuted, the obligation is that you have to destroy that piece of evidence. The person, meaning the accused, may also witness the destruction if he or she so wishes. This respects the fact that DNA is deeply personal, and I think the mover said it from the beginning of the case. Once the criminal justice purpose has ended, the state should not retain the material without proper legal basis. And this is how it used to be before. And they dig up your file, you know how I feel as a defense, from years ago when your DNA is on file, that it is to be destroyed if it is not going to be used. Finally, Madam Speaker, the transitional provision is also balanced. It protects previous cases from being undermined merely because the DNA evidence was expressed using a different approach to what is being proposed, as opposed to using a modern scientific measure rather than the older terminology. At the same time, it preserves the power of the court to grant relief where the evidence was unreliable, where disclosure was lacking, where the accused had no fair opportunity to challenge the evidence, or where a miscarriage of justice occurred. So, Madam Speaker, from the standpoint of a former defense counsel, I support this bill wholeheartedly because it improves the law while preserving the rights of the accused persons. It strengthens investigations, it strengthens fairness, it assists the prosecution, it protects the defense. It modernizes DNA evidence and it insists on judicial oversight, which is the major part for me. It insists on judicial oversight, disclosure, proportionality, privacy, and clear explanation. This is the kind of reform our justice system requires. I therefore support this bill and wish it safe passage through this honorable House. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for St. Christopher II, seconder of the bill. Is there another presenter? I recognize the Honourable Member for Nevis.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
And From the onset, let me say, I'll be brief, because I believe the move of the bill would have laid it out clearly to this honorable House and the listening and viewing public, I'm sure. And of course, as a parliament, we continue to strengthen the laws and provide law enforcement with the tools to execute their duties. And so, commendation must be given. And it probably sounds strange coming from the opposition's side of the aisle, but we are here as legislators to pass laws, and I don't think we can be acrimonious about it in any way. Meaning that when laws are passed or laws are adopted by this parliament, it's meant to make the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis much safer and to ensure that we are doing what we are mandated to do. But Madam Speaker, while we are seeking to strengthen these laws, I want to point out that this particular amendment bill is an amendment of the original or the parent bill which was passed some time ago, some years ago, which is the Evidence Act. And so in presenting these amendments today, something that came to my mind and which is very clear is that I'm not seeing penalties for persons, individuals who tamper with DNA evidence or any such thing. And why I say that is because in this particular amendment bill, at least I have seen penalties under section 155A, subsection 5, where a person, and I can read it, a person who, without reasonable excuse, intentionally obstruct the lawful execution of an order made under section 155.7 or 155.11 commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $20,000 or imprisonment for 12 months or to both. The reason why I speak about penalties, Madam Speaker, is that when someone subjects themselves or agrees to, under the law, court would have ordered DNA to be extracted or taken from an accused, that person must have the confidence. And also, much more than confidence, there must be trust that their DNA evidence will be handled appropriately or properly under the law. And if there is any contravention of that, there must be some repercussions to such. Now, I don't have the original bill before me, so I suppose it may speak to it, but I figure it might have been prudent or might have made sense to include such in this amended bill that is being presented today, so that at least the general public will be aware, and those who we hold in high esteem of protecting our laws would understand there are repercussions, and serious repercussions, that is, to any breach of that trust and the confidence that could be eroded if that trust is broken. So it was just a short intervention on my part, because I think enough has been said, but I don't want us to think along those lines where penalties and serious fines and penalties are levied against such persons who would turn out to be unscrupulous along the way, because we're all human, and of course persons do things, and these are what would certainly erode that confidence if such things do occur. So I don't know, a move of the bill, I don't know if that makes or my intervention will spur any movement on your part, but I hope it does, because the message must be sent that we are trying our utmost best here as a parliament to improve our laws, to strengthen our laws, and to provide the confidence and the trust that is needed out there in the community. And as such, I will give my blessings to this particular bit of legislation with the hope that at least at some point we'll have an occasion where penalties and so forth will be, made available to the public, and strong penalties that is too, to show that we are serious about what we are doing. And that is my brief intervention, Madam Speaker. May it please you.
Thank you to the honourable member for Nevis 11. Is there another presenter? Member for Nevis 11, your microphone, please. Thank you. Is there another presenter? I recognize the Honourable Attorney General, mover of the bill.
Madam Speaker, before I wrap up,
Yes, please.
may I simply ask for a 5-minute break to the top of the hour so that I can have a brief discussion with members, because I think there's a potential solution to the recommendation made by the member opposite that we can include, and I can then discuss how we would fix that lacuna. So just I will need 5 minutes. I've already drafted it.
Very well. House will rise for a few minutes. Honourable AG.
May it please you, Madam Speaker, grateful for the few minutes. I rise to wrap up the debate on the bill shortly titled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026. Madam Speaker, whilst we were on break, I had an opportunity to speak to the member opposite who raised a very good proposal for the bill, which is a proposal that two offences be included in the bill. One, that anybody that obstructs the lawful execution of an order with respect to DNA be punished, but also the persons that handle the DNA also similarly be punished if they otherwise use the DNA for purposes not included in the order. And that is a very reasonable recommendation which we have crafted the language for. Therefore, I want to read what is being proposed. I had a meeting with the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, and with members on this side and the opposite side. And this is what we're proposing, Madam Speaker. But I want to start with the section 155.14, which says that DNA obtained pursuant to this section, unless ordered by the court, shall be used only for the investigation or prosecution of the offense for which the sample was sought, any related proceedings arising out of the same facts, or such other purpose as the court may expressly authorize. Now that provision exists, but there's no punishment for breaching it. Therefore, we are proposing that in section 155A, subsection 5 be amended as follows. A person who, without reasonable excuse, A, intentionally obstructs the lawful execution of an order made under section 155.7 or 155.11, which is the original language, and this is the new language, or uses, discloses, retains, transfers, tests, analyzes, publishes, or otherwise deals with a bodily sample, surrogate DNA sample, test result, DNA profile, or any information derived from such sample, result, or profile for a purpose other than a purpose authorized under section 155.14, authorized by an order or direction of the court, or permitted by any other written law, then commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $20,000 or to imprisonment for 12 months or to both. So we believe that captures the punishment for someone who mistreats or misdeals with DNA. And we've also proposed that there be a new section 6, so we're pushing down the existing subsection 6 in 155A to 7, and we want to include, and we're proposing to include, a subsection 6 which reads, subsection 5 does not apply to the use, disclosure, retention, transfer, testing, analysis, publication, or other dealing that is reasonably necessary for compliance with an order or direction of the court, for disclosure in criminal proceedings, for the preservation of forensic integrity, or for the lawful administration of justice. That way, for example, if an officer in the DP's office submits the report of the DNA to the lawyer for the defendant, that person isn't infringing the rule because they are doing it for the purpose of disclosure in the administration of justice. So this now restricts the punishment to persons who are going outside of the administration of justice to reveal information in relation to the DNA. So we're thankful for the useful contribution from the opposition, and we hope that the proposed amendment appeases their concerns, which is a very reasonable concern, and it shows that this House is working, Madam Speaker. This House is made up of government side and opposition side, MPs and senators, all giving their input on the reasonable development of modern laws in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we're thankful for the member opposite for providing that. So, Madam Speaker.
Honourable
Yes,
member,
please.
just a moment. I think it would be useful to have it prepared and circulated in advance of committee stage so that everyone understands what is before them.
Understood.
And we properly insert it into the bill.
Okay, I will arrange for it to be printed.
I'd be grateful.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Because to hear it and to read it are two different things.
Yes, Madam
please.
Speaker. We will do so. So as I wrap up, we'll just ask for another 5 minutes to get that circulated for members before the committee stage. So, Madam Speaker, I don't have much more to add. The evidence amendment bill is measured, it's necessary, and it's balanced. It modernizes the law for DNA evidence. It recognizes modern scientific and statistical methods. It allows the court to authorize direct bodily samples in appropriate serious cases. It creates a carefully supervised framework for surrogate DNA sampling. It requires ordinary language explanations. It requires disclosure. It requires expert evidence. It requires least intrusive suitable method. It protects privacy, dignity, health, and fairness. It restricts the use of DNA material even more now with the proposed amendment. It provides for destruction where appropriate. It validates past reliance on scientifically recognized methods while preserving relief where there has been unfairness or miscarriage of justice. And therefore, it's modern and it's principled. And there's one point before I wrap up, Madam Speaker. In the previous version of the bill and in the previous legislation, there was a presumption when a person refused, because in the previous Evidence Act, there was no way to compel DNA evidence to be provided. So there was a presumption against the person who refused. We removed that presumption because now there's a court-controlled way of obtaining the DNA or the surrogate DNA. Therefore, in this amendment, in subsection 9 of 155, there's no longer a need, Madam Speaker, to give the person the warning that any refusal, I'm going to read it for the court, for the House. It is subsection Oh, sorry. Apologies. Yes. Subsection 2 says that before bodily sample is taken, sought, or requested under this section, the person concerned shall be informed in ordinary language of the nature of the sample sought, yes. Purpose for which it is sought, yes. Possible use of the resulting evidence. And D said the consequence of refusal, failure, or non-compliance without reasonable excuse. That needs to be removed because there's no consequence for refusal anymore. And then the last one should be the possibility that application may be made to the court for an order authorizing. So in the committee stage, Madam Speaker, we're going to ask for D to be removed as well. And I hope that I've explained to the general public the importance of this bill and why it is being brought. And it is our duty to bring modern laws to the Parliament that, in the colloquial term, are up to the time. And it's also good for the public to have heard a former prosecutor myself, a former defense counsel, the honorable member for St. Christopher II, give our different perspectives on the bill and how it creates that balance. And that is our hope, that this will be a balanced mechanism for ensuring that DNA evidence can be used in our further goal to modernize our justice system and the administration of justice in the Federation. So I wish the bill... Yes, he did. And he presented a perspective not just of a juror, Madam Speaker, not just as a juror, but as we used to say in law school, member for number 2 will know, the man on the Clapham bus. But the woman on the Newcastle bus, he's presenting that perspective as well, which is important as he's a representative of his constituents. So thank you, member for Nevis 11. Yes. So we will deal with that in committee stage, Madam Speaker. Before I wrap up the debate, I will ask just for 5 minutes until 20 past 1, because we have an important event to attend. Sorry, 25 past 1 will give us an opportunity to print and circulate to complete the sitting. Grateful.
Also rise for 5 minutes. Honorable Attorney General? No, let me just. Honorable?
Yes?
Are we ready to proceed?
Yes, please, with committee stage. Yes, please.
Very well. So the question is that the bill shortly entitled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 be read a second time. Those in favor? Nobody else is in? I'll put the question again. The question is that the bill shortly entitled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Evidence Act, Cap 3.12, to modernize the law relating to DNA evidence, to provide for scientifically recognized statistical interpretation of DNA results, to provide for court-ordered taking of bodily samples and surrogate DNA sampling, to strengthen the consequences of refusal to provide samples, to validate prior reliance on scientifically recognized DNA evaluative measures, and for related or incidental matters, otherwise known as the Evidence Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a second time. House moves to committee stage. Madam Clerk.
Clause 1.
Yes, may I propose that Clause 1 be amended, Clause 2 be amended, Clause 3 be amended, Clause 4 be amended, and the long title be amended, as reflected in the document circulated to members.
So we'd have to do two questions. We'd have to propose it in two questions. Clauses 1 through 4, and then the long title. It has to be two questions based on the fact that it's two separate sections, essentially. So the first question is that clauses 1 through 4, as amended, stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The question is that the long title, as amended, stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House resumes. I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
May it please you, Madam Speaker, I rise to report that the bill shortly entitled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 has passed through committee stage with amendments, and I therefore now move that the bill shortly titled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 be read a third time and passed into law.
Is there a seconder? I recognize the Honorable
Madam
Senator.
Speaker, with
Dr.
your
Clark.
leave, I rise to second that motion.
Very well. The question is that the bill shortly entitled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 be read a third time and passed into law. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Evidence Act, Cap 3.12, otherwise known as the Evidence Amendment Bill 2026.
The bill shortly entitled Evidence Amendment Bill 2026 has been read a third time and passed into law.
Motions, resolutions, adjournment.
I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 6.
I rise, Madam Speaker, on the adjournment of this very historic and important meeting of the National Assembly here in Bastille on Thursday, the 11th of June, 2026, in order to express on behalf of all the members of this National Assembly and all of our citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis our profound condolences, sympathies, regrets on the passing of Elston Nero Matthew, well known as Elimat. I use his name, Elston Matthew, or Elston Nero, I should say, because back in 1965, we entered the same classroom for the first time as two young boys, one from Newtown and one from St. Paul's, and started our secondary education at the St. Kitts Nevis Grammar School. He has progressed way beyond me and has become our national icon in music, in calypso, in composing, and with regret, today we know that he is being buried, his mortal remains. But before that, there is going to be a significant recognition of his life and his works. From here, all members will proceed to the Newtown playing field, where his body already is lying in state, and nationals of this country and abroad are seeing him for the last time. Then there will be a service starting at 2 o'clock, and then we proceed to the cemetery. This morning I had the opportunity, while you were starting the Parliament, Madam Speaker, to stand on the veranda, myself, and of course, I'm the member for constituency number 2, sorry. And we saw the entourage, the people on the sidewalks, some crying, some hailing, as the body was taken from the Jenkins Funeral Home, went up Church Street and down 4th Street so that he would have had his last travel through Bastille. Today, as a people, we are deeply moved and saddened, but we are happy that he has left behind a legacy that we shall follow, young and old. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, the Honourable Member, St. Christopher 6. I recognize the Honourable Attorney General.
May it please, Madam Speaker, I beg for the House to be adjourned, sine die.
Oh, is there a seconder? I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher.
I'd like to second the motion, Madam Speaker.
The question is that this House stands adjourned. Sine die. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This Honourable House stands adjourned. Sine die.